Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 11 of our procurement sourcing series. In this episode, we will continue to explore about the additional capabilities or the rule types within purchasing policies in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. With that note, let's quickly jump into today's topic. Let me quickly get into today's topic. I'll just quickly walk through these slides we already discussed in our previous episode regarding purchasing policies. Make sure that you check the part 1 before coming into part 2. So in this episode, we will be primarily covering about category policy rule and free approval rule for purchase orders. These two are very important rule, or I would say very important functionalities within purchasing policies, which will help us to control the vendor or the vendor accounts which need to be displayed in your purchase requisitions. And this is actually related to your purchase order, where whenever there is any changes done at your line level or header level, whether you need to re-trigger the approval processes for the purchase order workflow or not. So first, let's try to understand what is category policy rule. The category policy rule defines how users can select vendors for each category, not items. That is the most important point which we need to note here. The category policy rule, once you define the list of vendors for a specific category, which you have to define it in your procurement category hierarchy, which we already discussed. So once if you define the vendors in your procurement category hierarchy, then those vendors can be used in your purchase requisitions, or you can allow all the vendors to be selected, or only those vendors who are preferred and approved can be selected, or you cannot, or you can also define a rules as such. The vendor selection in the purchase requisition is not allowed. So all those combinations are possible if you define the category policy rule. It also defines requirements for receiving and invoicing processes. So any purchase order which got created from the purchase requisitions with the category policy rule, defining the receiving and invoicing process, then based on this rule, whatever we have defined in the policy will be used whenever you perform the receiving and invoicing processes. So let's quickly jump into D365 screen so that we'll be able to understand it. So this is the procurement policy which we created as in the yesterday video, in the episode number 10. So now let me see. So one rule we have created here, one rule for category policy also we have created. Now one rule I just created for category policy rule, right? So all you have to do is, let me first of all retire this policy rule, so that I just want to create a new policy rule. So once the policy rule is retired, then you can create a new policy rule. At any point in time, you can have only one active policy rule against any rule type. So let me click on create new policy rule. And then now you can select the effective date and the expiration date. Let me click on add. So here you can see it, the system allows us to capture the category. So you need to make sure that it can be any of the categories. Here you will see all the hierarchy of the procurement, whichever you have configured. Let's say computers is the category for which I want to allow all the vendor selection whenever the procurement purchase requisitions are raised. So vendor selection, you will have four options. Either you allow all vendors, do not allow vendor selection in this category. So whenever this particular category computers is selected, then you are not allowing the users to select the vendors in the purchase requisitions. In those cases, probably the organization might be strategically deciding any purchase requisitions for which is raised need to be floated through RFQ. From RFQ, we pick the vendor, and then we choose, and then we use those vendors to raise the purchase orders. Maybe in those cases, that's why I say it's purely all these configuring purchasing policies depends on your purchasing strategies or the sourcing strategies with which you want to go. And if you want to allow only vendors that are preferred or approved for this category, this preferred or approved vendor are actually configured in your procurement category hierarchy. So let me also show you, we already discussed about this in the procurement category hierarchy session, but if you go to procurement category hierarchy, so in the procurement category hierarchy, you can configure the vendors who are preferred, who are in the preferred status. And for this particular case, I think for computers, I'm not sure whether we have already configured. Yeah, we have already configured the vendors with vendor status approved, and two vendors we have preferred status. So in the policy, let's say if we select allow only vendors that are preferred for this category, then when we raise the purchase requisitions, we will be able to select only either the vendor account 1001 or 104, Acme Office Supply or Best Suppliers. So let's try this out. Let's say if I allow only vendors that are preferred, and if you want to show questionnaire, you can show this. If you enable this, then the questionnaire will be enabled in your purchase requisition. And also, if you want to have this is what invoice policy which we were saying, that whether you want to have three-way matching or two-way matching, and this will be applicable only to those purchase orders which got generated from the purchase requisitions with this particular rule. Otherwise, by general it takes the rule applied in the global parameter in accounts payable. And if you enable this receiving requirements, then every time you receive the products, you'll be able to correct the products according to the regarding the and recording before recording the purchases. So this probably we will discuss when we get into the product receipt processes. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel and make sure that you watch the video until the end, which is very important to get the benefit out of this procurement and sourcing series. So right now what we have done is we have added the category computers, and we are allowing only vendors that are preferred for this category. So if I create a purchase requisition, we should be able to see only these two vendor accounts. So let me close this. Then policy rule start date. Yeah, this is fine. Let the system uses the current date, and then let me save the purchasing policy. So now this policy rule is saved, and you can see the number aside the policy rule type, and which means there are two rules over here. One is expired, another one is active. So using which you can identify how many rules are there in the respective rule types. So let me go back to purchase requisition form. Here procurement and sourcing, purchase requisition, all purchase requisitions. Let me create a new purchase requisition. Let me keep it as vendor test -01. So let's add we need to add the category computers, because for which we have actually configured the category policy rule. So now instead of adding the item number, let me add the procurement category. Let me select the computers, then let me click on OK. So once I click on OK, you can see on the line level we are allowed to select the vendor account. So in the drop down, like you can see, I can see only the preferred vendor accounts. Let me move my video on the top. So you can see the vendor accounts which are actually preferred for this particular category, right? So let me remove this line. Then let me change the policy type. So in the policy type, let me just click on effective. It will take you to the page where you can modify the rule. So in the computer, let me do not allow vendor selection in this category. So right before to this, the scenario which we tested is, we were allowing the users to select only the preferred vendors. Now we are not allowing the users or the requesters to select any of the vendors. So let me close this and let me save this. Don't forget to save the policy. So this is now activated. Now let me go back to the purchase requisition. I think probably we may need to create a new purchase requisition. I'm not sure, but let's try adding a line. Right now, it is now showing me all the vendor accounts in the system. But let's add the category computers. Let me click on OK. So now the computer is added. Now you can see adding the vendor account option is disabled. I don't have the drop down functionality over here, but otherwise, if I go and change the category, let me select calculators and click on OK. Now you can see I am allowed to select any of the vendor accounts, because we have actually configured this purchasing policy only for the computers category. So that's the reason we are not allowed to select any of the vendors whenever we select the computer category. So this is how you need to configure in your purchasing policies, for which particular category you want to allow the vendor selection, or for which categories you don't want to allow the vendor selection, or which categories you want to go by the preferred or approved vendors. Only those preferred and approved vendors alone will be available. Or if you want, you can also select configure what is the matching policy, whether you want a three-way matching or two-way matching. You can decide upon that accordingly based on your organizational specific needs. Let me close this. Let me go back. So here I already discussed about this. If there are multiple, let's say over a period of time, you may find that there are multiple rules which is defined against each and every rule type. Then make sure that you click on the top, and you can select which is the all or past. If you click on current, you can see only because this is the current one which is active. And if you click on post, other than the current, whatever the list of other rule types which are available, all those will be displayed over here. If you click on all, of course, all the rules whichever is applicable will be visible over here. So make sure that you will select the appropriate rule types and then configure it. Otherwise, you will not be able to check the details. So this is the number one rule type which we want to discuss. So the next one is reapproval rule for purchase orders. This is something which is very, very important, and this is widely used across many configurations, many organizations, and configuration of the same is um, paramount, I would say, because it's not easy to configure this, and you need a lot of collaboration among the purchase manager, the system administrator, and with the vendors, and before you configure any of the reapproval rule, because every time it's better we'll go back to the presentation so that the fundamental definition of reapproval rule for purchase orders is clear to you. First of all, the reapproval rule is an optional rule. First of all, this is not something which is mandatory. This is an optional rule that defines the criteria for requiring reapproval when a purchase order is changed. So whenever we have the change management enabled in our procurement and sourcing parameters, the purchase order has to go through the process of purchase order workflow. Yes, in those cases, once the purchase order is confirmed, then you will not be able to make any changes manually. Instead, you should go through the process of request change, right? So first, let me explain you the process of request change, and then let's get back to this particular rule, because people who are already aware of it, yeah, let me remove this line. People who are already aware of the process request change, probably you don't need to spend time on this. You can forward this video. But people who are not aware of the request for change capability, because I just want to quickly show it to them so that they also get benefited out of this. So let me click on new. So first of all, when we create a purchase order, I'll just quickly create a purchase order. Do not worry about this. We will also discuss about in detail how to create a purchase order, what are all the configurations which has to be done. We will discuss in detail about those things in the as we progress in this procurement and sourcing series. So I've selected a vendor account. Let me click on OK. And so right now I have already enabled the workflow. So let me click on, let me select any item number, and then let it be a quantity one. So right now you can see the approval status is in draft. So if it is in draft, then I need to submit the purchase order for workflow, and then it has to be approved by my manager. And then once if it is approved, then I can confirm this purchase order. And then with the purchase order confirmation actually sends a commitment to the vendor that you can supply this material. So until unless a confirmation is made, it's not a commitment to the vendor that you can confirmation to the vendor that you can supply the materials to the buying legal entity. So right now we have submitted the purchase order. The status became in review. I'm sure the approval process takes some time, but once if it is approved, then once if it is changed to approved, then you have to go through the request change process, which we will quickly see right now. I think it is taking time. Sometimes this workflow process also takes time. So I will strongly recommend you to forward this video because do not spend much time on this. Because I am just thinking how to quickly approve this, but sometimes the workflow gets triggered. Um, Maybe a minute or two. Okay, but let me go back to the presentation. And the second point is the selected fields are evaluated in the purchase order workflow when requires purchase order reapproval condition is set up in the workflow. This is something which is very, very important. So the selected fields are evaluated. So what are the fields which we have selected? Because in this rule, we can select the list of fields which need to be evaluated whenever you want a reapproval. For some case, let's say we have a quantity field, we have dimensions field, we have taxation related fields. For all the fields, probably we do not need the reapproval process to be triggered, right? For some of the fields, as a purchasing agent, I have the discretion to decide, okay, this does not require reapproval with my manager. So I can just simply change the field, because every change cannot go to the manager, and the manager cannot review every line level changes and approve it, because that's not viable. That's not a viable option. And it's also a kind of time consuming, and you will not be able to quickly make those changes, incorporate those changes, and then submit it to the vendor, right? So that's the whole idea of using this reapproval. That's why I said you need absolutely great coordination among your team, purchasing manager or the sourcing managers, your buying legal entity, your system administrator, your vendors all need to be aligned. What are all those changes for which the approval need to be triggered, and what are all those changes the approval should not be triggered? You should be absolutely clear about that. So let me see if the approval is initiated, but if not, I will also tell you the process of. So yeah, now you can see the approval is initiated. Let me reassign this user because admin is the user to which I will quickly reassign this and I will approve the purchase order. So it changes to the status of from in review to approved. Let me refresh this page. Now as a user, I'm also acting as a manager right now. So I approve this purchase order. So imagine that my subordinate has submitted this purchase order. Now, as a manager, I reviewed the purchase order and now I have approved it. So once the purchase order is approved, then the status will change from in review to approved, right? But the second point, which we have mentioned in the PowerPoint slide is the selected fields are evaluated in the purchase order workflow when the requires purchase order reapproval condition is set up in the workflow. So you need to configure your workflow also. So let me also open a workflow window. I have already kept it open. So in the workflow, this is the workflow editor view, which probably many might not be knowing this. Probably, I think probably in the future also we will plan a separate series for this workflow editor, or how do we configure the workflows, what are the various functionalities which are available within workflow. But make sure that you subscribe to the channel D3 Talks to get notified whenever I post videos related to this. So every workflow as a condition, or you can have the approval mechanism as a start node and end node. And in this case, what as per the data which we have, the purchase order workflow should have the requires purchase order reapproval condition specified in it. So I have taken a conditional node. Uh, so you can see here, from here I have just pulled out my conditional node. So if you can also pull out your conditional node over here, and you can add the node and subnode. So this is how I actually did this. So I have deleted that conditional node. So you can add a conditional node. So in this conditional node, if you go to properties, so I have added a condition. So yeah, by adding the condition, you can simply click on add condition. So in the add condition on the nearby drop down, so if you click on this drop down under purchase orders, there is an option called purchase orders requires reapproval. Yeah, this is the one. So this is the one which we have actually selected. So make sure that you select this condition, and let me delete this. This is not required. Let me clear this out. Let me do it fresh. So here purchase orders, you have to select the purchase orders requires reapproval. Requires purchase order reapproval. So this is the condition. Is value is yes. So if this condition is yes, then the system will go and check the rule which we have configured in our purchasing policies and check what are all the field level changes the system should consider and trigger the approval workflow, trigger the reapproval workflow. If not, the purchase order will be automatically updated. Once the purchase order is submitted to workflow, it will be automatically approved, so that every time the manager does not want to go and update it, check the field level changes, maybe some communications are required, all these can be eliminated, right? So that's the whole idea of using this purchase order workflow. Reapproval, let me close this. Then now let me go back to the page. Let me refresh this page. So now you can see it is approved, right? So let me go to the purchasing policy. So here now we have configured our workflow. Make sure that the configuration of the workflow is very, very important. And then in the reapproval rule for purchase orders, you will be able to view all the list of fields whichever relevant to the purchase order form. With respect to tab level, you can see either use the tree view. I will always suggest you to go use the tree view rather than a list view. List view will give you all the fields, and I'm also sure the field name is not fully visible over here. So it's better you can use the tree view, where you will also be able to know what is the FOSS tab under which this is coming, or what is the section in which the field is available. Let's say it is setup. Setup, I think, okay, sales tax group is there. Okay, that is fine. And in general, let me see what is that those things are added. Purchase order lines in general. Okay, we have purchase order lines stopped. Okay, so let me go to purchase order. If you go here under general, there is a toggle called stopped, right? So whenever a user stops the specific line from the procurement, then I want the approval to be triggered. Otherwise, I just don't want the approval to be triggered. And in other ways, you can also see here that in the general section, I saw some, I think in the setup, yeah. Think in the setup, okay, we have the sales tax group. Okay, let the sales tax group be here. Whatever is selected will trigger a reapproval. Whatever is not selected, which is under available section, will not trigger the reapproval. So let the sales tax group be here as such. But we have purchase order line stopped, which is under the selected pane, right? So if I make any changes to the stopped toggle, then it will trigger a reapproval. And if I make any changes to the sales tax group, it should not trigger a reapproval, and the purchase order should be automatically approved. Okay, let us keep that configuration as such. Let me save this. Let me go back to all purchase orders. Now you can see it is approved. All I have to do is let me confirm this. So now I have confirmed this purchase order. So after confirming the purchase order, status will become from approved to confirmed. Then only you will be able to click on request change. So now we are going for a request change process. Now I feel that I need to change my sales tax group. So let me go to setup. Let me click on edit. Um, let me click on the sales tax group. Let it be CA. I'm not sure what is the sales tax group is, but let it be. So because I'm making a change at the line level. Now, since I have made a change at the line level, actually I need to submit it for workflow. But this change, I don't want it to be don't want it to trigger the I want it to trigger the approval workflow, but I don't want my manager to view this and approve this, right? So manager has already given me a go ahead that if you make any changes to the sales tax group, he I just don't want to submit it again for the reapproval. So let me submit this. So once I submit it, this purchase order will be automatically approved. We will not go to the approval, reassign it, and then approve this. So now you can see the status is in interview. Because sales tax group is actually part of the available section. We have not included it in the purchase order lines. So each and every pane, every section, you can view it over here, and you can select the appropriate fields. Make sure that you select the appropriate fields, which is very, very important. That's why if I told you the configuration of these sections are very important. Under setup, we actually kept the sales tax group here. Okay, so let me go back to the purchase order, and even if I click on workflow, I think there is some issue. Okay, let me check the purchase procurement and sourcing workflow. So this is the purchase order workflow. Let me check the versions. Okay, this is the version which is active, and let me go back. Let me go back to the purchase order. The purchase order number is this 176. Let me go to workflow. Sorry, let me click on 176. I think it is taking time. I know this is you can see it right now. The status is automatically updated as approved. So we never reassigned it or approved it like the way we did before. But right now, even though we made a change at the line level, the system automatically, even though we changed the sales tax group, the system automatically updated the status to approved. Now what we will do is again we will confirm this purchase order. Confirm the purchase order. Once the purchase order is confirmed, again we will do a request change, but this time we will change the line stoppage toggle. Let me go to purchase order, request change. So now you can see the status became draft. As per the purchasing policy, what we have configured is in the purchase order lines under general. So purchase order lines stopped is included. So if I change the toggle of stopped, it should trigger a workflow. Now let me enable this. So I'm saying this, I'm going to stop this line from the purchasing of material which I want my manager to approve. So I stop this. Let me save this. Let me submit it for workflow. So this time it will trigger the workflow process for the approval from my manager. Last time it actually didn't trigger and it automatically approved my change request. Now this time it has to trigger a reapproval. I'm sure this workflow generally takes some time. That is based on the workflow job which runs in the background. Sometimes it takes time, but no issue. Let's quickly get into our presentation until that workflow gets triggered. So the second point is this, which we have already discussed about it. Make sure that you can apply this condition in your workflow editor, without which this functionality will not work. The third point is accounting distribution will always be reset when an approved purchase order with change management enabled is changed. So that is a concept functionality called accounting distribution, which actually allocates the the financial the financial your financial based on your account, based on your accounts, it allocates your funds. So the thing is like this accounting distribution happens every time whenever the change management is enabled and you set it for reapproval. So you should be aware that if you want to avoid a reapproval of purchase order when certain fields are changed, the field accounting distribution changed should not be included as selected. So there is a field in our purchasing policy rule, reapproval rule for purchase orders. There is a specific field called accounting distribution.changed which should not be selected as a selected field. So accounting distribution as selected, I think that should come under I think under general. I'm not sure. We need to check this, but let me go back to list view so that I can check accounting. I think it is in the top. Okay, so accounting distribution dot change. This field cannot be included in the selected session, right? That's a guidance by design which comes from Microsoft. So make sure that this field is not select so that the accounting distribution will not be triggered. So let me go back to our original purchase order. Let me refresh this. Now you can see the purchase order workflow got triggered since we actually changed a field which we added as part of the selected session. Right, so once again I have to go ahead and approve this, otherwise it will not be automatically changed to the status from in review to approved. So that's the whole idea of using reapproval rule for purchase orders. So thanks for watching this video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel D365 Talks to get notified whenever I post videos related to Microsoft Dynamics 365 F&O, Microsoft and Microsoft Copilot. I'll catch you soon in the episode number 12, where we will discuss about the additional rule types within purchasing policies. Until then, Sri Ram Sivashankaran signing off.